be the glasses crew.
Hey
guys.
Blocking ones. So really...
Hey guys, I hope you're well. You are on the Talkwoods. It's me, your host, Nat Rich, and this evening I am joined by Bill Ranshaw, who's back with me. This is your fourth show.
Yes, it is.
Growing and growing and growing. Very excited. And then we've got Adam, which is your second show.
Yes.
We did one about anxiety a while ago, didn't we? If I remember rightly. And then we have a brand new person in the corner, which I'm sure Angie's going to be back for more than just one. So Angie's a new friend of mine from LinkedIn. I was stalking her a little while last year and seeing her amazing videos. And I was like, this lady knows what she's talking about. So I reached out. So you're one of the very few that slips through my tiny slice of social media in the world. So yeah, everything else I ignore, but you made it. So today's show is about rejection, and we must have all felt that at some point in our lives. So we're going to have an awkward conversation around that. We're going to discuss kind of rejection from both sides. And what I mean by both sides is I think it's the best to discuss rejection when we get rejected, and then also the feelings that we go through when we have to reject someone, because it's not nice to do that. And there is another side to it. It's not just the one side of the coin there. So I wanted to first of all kind of do a little bit more of an intro with Angie, and I'll start going back round so you can kind of know about them all a little bit more. But is my background noise okay, by the way? Because I can hear something here, but I don't know if you guys can.
You're fine, not like it was last week.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. Yeah, last week Bill had his speaker on, and I could just same with the guys from the sound healing. Yes, Jonathan Goldman. They bless them. They turn their speaker up, and I can hear myself go around the room before I actually finish the question, which is weird. But okay, so we're going to start with Angie. Angie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you are so fabulous that I stalked you and got you here?
Okay, so my official title is a confidence and career success coach. I basically mostly help people at executive level, but at the same, that's mostly for my one-to-ones. But I also run like group coaching as well. And it's just standard psychographic things that people struggle with, like dealing with rejection, unsurprisingly, people pleasing, people that not really being themselves, like a different level of honesty. A lot of people think that they're honest because they simply don't lie, and it's so much more to it than that. So just helping people just be much more understanding themselves, understanding their own triggers, but also being able to operate in a much more authentic way. And as a result, it's not really about making themselves better to be better at what they do. It's actually just taking the foot off the brake a little bit and just allowing themselves to be free to reach their own potential that way. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell.
And Angie does these amazing little videos, which are so simple. And are they a set amount of time? Because they're super short. Do you keep to a set amount of time when you do them? Or is it just kind of as long as it takes?
I try to keep them under 2 minutes, but I try to keep them as short as possible. If I can make it for a minute, I will. But I've normally got so much content. And the hardest part is trimming it to get it into something that you can follow it. It's not so long.
I highly recommend we put her LinkedIn underneath. So if anybody's interested in watching those videos, just go and stalk her on LinkedIn, because that's the only social media I really think that anybody should be on, is LinkedIn, and YouTube occasionally. But it's just really short, impactful videos that just make a lot of sense. And I also read the comments of the people that you get, making comments, and you do have an impact, and it's a short, quick impact, which is sometimes people don't want to talk about their feelings, but if they recognize themselves in your videos, they're like, oh, that's me, because you give a really good example of like, this is what you may have been doing and this is what you may want to do in the future. And it's just a really nice, quick way of kind of a self-development, but, without the blame, as it were. So I really appreciate your efforts there and your work. So highly recommended. So we will jump over to Adam. Adam, I've mentioned your show with the Great Connection Festival on most of my shows already, but I'd like you to introduce yourself, because you say it better than I do, and tell people who you are and what you do and all about your festival, please.
Okay, well, thank you. My name's Adam. I am the founder of Polite Club and the Great Connection Festival. And Polite Club is a brand of clothing. It's a little bit more than that, but on the surface, it's a brand of clothing to inspire and enable people to talk about how they feel. And so this word on my shirt sums it up, which is vulnerable. So it's about rebelling through your vulnerability. And then what the show or the Connection Festival that you've mentioned, thank you for that, which you'll be hosting on the music channel, which is awesome. Is an extension of Polite Club, essentially. So it's called the Great Connection Festival, and surprise, surprise, it's about connection. And it's about that. And I did the first one very quickly in May last year, with about 4 weeks to go. And it was because of lockdown, and I'm a very, very big believer that connection, like Kay Tempest has been speaking about very much recently in her new book on connection, which is fantastic, is an answer to a lot of our problems. Like if connecting with people is the single most important thing I believe that we need to do. And a lot of joy and a lot of human progress can come because of that. And so the festival, this is the second iteration, is now sponsored by the ZSA, Zero Suicide Alliance. So I need to kind of drop that in if that's all right.
You can drop in
there's 5 channels of talks, music, movement, arts, and conversation. There's 40 acts. There's loads of stuff going on, that's happening at the end of January.
Amazing. And I get to see how passionate you are behind the scenes because I spend time with you, and I love your authenticity, and like you really are doing your own self-work as you're growing, and you see the need in it as well, which I really, to recognize the need out there is one thing, but then to actually be able to do something about it is another thing. So hats off to you there. And obviously I love your t-shirts and your clothing. I thought about it. I was like, why did I not wear one of the t-shirts today? But I completely forgot. Sorry. I was too busy nosing what's going on in America right now. And bringing me on to America, Bill, that will bring me back to you, my dear. So Bill, introduce yourself in your fabulous way. Tell us what you do.
Awesome. Thank you, Nat, Adam, and Angie. It's so great to be on the show with you guys today. I've been stalking your stuff as well. I am a lack of better, or I guess just typical type words. I'm a personal development coach and accountability coach. And I really do focus on helping people find their own spiritual awakening and focusing on porn addiction recovery. And all of this, I have since done a lot of formal training around it, but in the beginning it was all around my own experiences and fighting through and getting through it. And so when you develop this topic around rejection, man, did that speak to me. That was probably the first 30 years of my life and the fears around that. So I am so excited to kind of dive in around the psychology of it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, for me, rejection, I really get annoyed when people go, it's not rejection, it's a cosmic redirection, because it's kind of like, I get what they're saying, and I get that it's, it's not always somebody rejects you or something rejects you or whatever, you feel that the world is rejecting you. You think, yeah, something better will come along. But there's a large amount of processing that needs to go through with rejection, and a large amount of reflection and a real kind of ownership of the situation, so you can move through the rejection rather than just moving past it and hoping that it never happens again. There's a real depth of work that I feel that a lot of people can miss at the moment, and they feel it, but they just kind of move it away and brush it away with thinking that something better is going to come on, which it is. But it's a good opportunity that when you have these feelings of rejection, they're the rawest, I think, that most people could feel. We really do feel it. It triggers things from when we're younger, and it really can make us feel like we're not loved and we're not wanted in some way, when sometimes that isn't necessarily true. So I'm going to kind of ask you all kind of like just an honest reflection of a time when you felt rejection in your life. I'd like to just make it very clear that rejection, we're not just talking about when a partner doesn't want you. We're talking about family, we're talking about friends, we're talking about life or jobs or any part of life that deals with rejection. But some people at home might be thinking of just about relationships. This is going to cover everything, really. So I think I'll start with Adam, if you wouldn't mind. If you can think of a time when you really felt rejection, whether it's recently or whether it's in the past, but probably the most significant one that you can talk about if you feel up to it.
Yeah, I've got two. Jump to mind, if you don't mind. The first one, which is the most recent, which was 5 years ago, actually. It sounds like a long time ago, but it was very significant, in fact. And it was the article that I wrote called The Hangover.
Yeah.
So which stands for a relationship hangover, which I didn't realize that I'd been in for 5 years. So till 2020, I was in a hangover for 5 years, essentially. And I got my heart broken quite dramatically. So I was rejected, and I didn't give myself time to process that. And I met somebody else, and it was all bumpy, and it didn't quite work. And then I got my heart broken again, and various different things. And I, let's say, broke a few hearts in the same way, accidentally. But what I realized, and through going through my own, my own self-development, that because of that, not allowing myself to process it, I just wasn't emotionally ready to meet somebody else. Like I hadn't given myself enough time. So until I recognized that pattern, like which took it from my subconscious to my conscious, then I could do something about it. Hence that article. So that's my most recent time. But then the one that was very, very significant, which isn't about relationships, it was to do with friends. But this is again through therapy and self-development, is that when I was about 14 or so, all of my friends rejected me at the same time. Like they just dropped, and that emotional trauma has until the last couple of years been affecting me. And I didn't know, like it's, I had no idea what it was, how it was, or there until very recently. And so it's just these emotional traumas can be very seemingly insignificant. At the time, it felt very significant because I was very abandoned. But then after that point, it's just kids messing around. But it really, really affected me.
Yeah. And how long was it like completely reject you and done? Or was it they were kind of playing around and you kind of ended up becoming friends with them again? Or did you have to mold a new friendship group at that age?
I did start a new friendship group at that age. And also that they slowly came back over time. But it was mainly because one person took umbrage to me and then she was turned everyone against me. And it was just kids being kids. But and then I had to deal with that, and as a 14-year-old or 15, I had no idea what was going on. Mainly, I didn't even know who to talk to, or what to talk to about it. But it still obviously really hurt. If it happened now, I could obviously verbalize what was going on for me, but literally I had no idea.
No, well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure people are going to reflect and they know those feelings as well. Angie, let's jump to you, if you wouldn't mind. You're currently on mute. I don't know if I've put you on mute. Or there you go. You've taken yourself off. Amazing.
No, just to cut out any background noise, just in case. Whenever I felt rejected, I think for me, the times that I find rejection comes up with how other people respond, and any time that I've been affected by it, is almost when it's in a situation where there's a particular narrative that other people expect you to adhere to. And the moment you show an opposing opinion against that, it really can trigger people in this way that it's unbelievable sometimes. So an example of that, and it's probably a bit of a hot topic because we just had a big thing going on in America, which I'm not going to go into now, obviously, but politics can do that. So even forget America and go back to the UK. I remember when in a few people I was hanging out with at the time, there was a big thing is it going to go to Tories or is it going to go to Labour or whatever? And looking into the manifestos, as a self-employed individual, I knew which one I'd be better off with. And at the time, my priority was to keep my house and my dog and everything that I care for. So, but I didn't actually vote for either of those two in the end. But either way, when people found out that I didn't vote for the same party as them, I was absolutely shocked at how people could react to that. And it caused sometimes a rift. And even to the extent of I don't even want to talk about it. I've got an opinion, you've got an opinion. Why don't we talk about all these other things in the world that there's to talk about? But because it was incredible how triggering it was for those people, just because I didn't agree with the same narrative that they agreed with. And it caused friction on a few times because they kept bringing it back up. And I was like, let's just not talk about it. But unless it was almost like the unspoken rule was, unless you're going to agree with me, I don't want to know you anymore. So that was quite tough to deal with because it was like, well, I'm not going to change who I am and pretend to agree with something that I don't agree with just to appease you. But similarly, if you don't want to be friends with me unless I'm thinking and feeling exactly the same way as you do, we've hit a bit of a roadblock here. So where do we go with it? And in situations like that, when the narrative is very pressing for somebody, I personally believe people show the true colours of okay, we can either step around this and we just agree to disagree, or it becomes this massive thing. And that's when you start realising how much of a long-term future you've got with them, because if the only friends you have in life are going to be with people that think and feel about the same stuff as you all the time, that's not realistic. So it's okay to have a difference of opinion, but if that makes somebody very triggered and want to be not around you or whatever, or frustrate them or make them angry, then that's a completely different ballgame. So that was my experience when it comes to something where you have a slightly different narrative to what theirs is as well.
Mm-hmm. And this is a really interesting part because it's not a significant moment. It's a repetitive event, as it were, because this can happen any day around any subject at any time is the difference of opinion. And there's a really key point I want to kind of come back into as well. We'll jump on to Bill, but I'm just going to make a note of that because you've triggered me into something else. But Bill, can you give us, before I dive into it, can you give us an example of your rejection or, a time that's your little dog's twiddling around in the background?
Yeah, they are. So they might be a little bit loud right now. Normally
No,
they're.
I wasn't sure if it was yours or Andy's dog. I'm not sure. Angie's dog. So
Mine are definitely running around. First of all, Adam and Angie both hit it on the head. I think on this type of rejection. And Angie, you spoke, political party most recently here in the States. That's a huge thing right now, where a lot of people actually have real fear around rejection of being part of a certain political party. I don't want to get into that aspect of it right now because that everybody's is dealing with a big piece of that. I will say specifically rejection. And I had an instance as recent as just last week, and this is on the work front. Because of the work that I've been doing over the last year, I had a substance and behavior addiction facility here in Denver reach out to me and wanting to see if I'd be interested in a community outreach position with the company. It wasn't something I was particularly looking for, but as I looked into it, I'm like, this is fantastic. And over about 3 weeks, I got extremely excited. Like, this would be a great opportunity to kind of expand on what I'm doing. And I went through a 2-interview process with them. And after the second interview, after I had become extremely involved emotionally with this position, they came back and rejected me. And they said, we're going to go a different direction. And so it's kind of the steal away, like, a little bit of that, why was I rejected? But I really think over the years, I've seen that rejection is how you handle rejection is a direct correlation to your self-esteem. Maybe self-confidence. There's probably a difference between two of those if you want to dissect them. But understanding what rejection is and how you can learn from it and what's going on. And I want to make sure, are the pups being too loud, whining around here?
Now they are. I think they want to join in. Have you been rejecting them this week? Is that
I guess so. There must be somebody outside. I don't know. But you take the opportunity. I went back through and I sent them a follow-up email of, I would regret if I did not ask to have a possible reconsideration for at least the third interview. And after that, if I were to have the third interview, if you still decide that I'm not a right fit, then I'll, gladly, wish you and maybe help you find a right candidate. And I apologize. These guys back here, this is real live radio. They are, they're whining people that
they want to be on I Am Sound. I don't blame them. It's fine.
So I went through that and realized I did everything that I could in that aspect. Part of you wants to go back, which I've done in the past on interviews, is, ask, like, what did I do wrong? Or why did you reject me? Or those type of things. But after having gone through the interview process and realizing I was completely authentic in who I was and who I wanted to be, why I wanted the position, that I don't know what they would have told me unless it was just a complete blindside. So that wasn't as important. And realizing, after 50 years, everything happens exactly the way it has to happen as long as you're authentic and put yourself into it fully. Mm-hmm. And so I took that as an opportunity to say, this just wasn't what was meant to be. I appreciate the opportunity to go through it and just, is it a learning experience? However you want to, relabel it, but not let it tear you up. I think you give yourself about 4 minutes to maybe have a little bit of that lull, but then realize, how can I catapult this into something different?
No, that's true. Good point. And it's good that you're interested in going back into that scenario, because most people would be like, oh my God, they rejected me, see you later. But you were like, let me open up that wound and sit right in there, which is quite a skill to do.
Yeah. And my past has always kind of been business development and sales. And then my entire youth was just rejection after rejection after rejection of, females. And then later in life, rejection of, closing deals, clients not wanting to work with you, and so many things. But kind of building that skill set around how you deal with rejection ultimately helps build, character and self-confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. While I'm talking, if you wouldn't mind putting your mute on, just in case the dogs go nuts again. Not because I need to be heard all the time, but no, just in case. There you go. Thank you very much. I've got two little stories of rejection. One is literally happened to me 3 days ago. And I'm living in Yorkshire at the moment at my parents' house, and I haven't seen a lot of my school friends from quite a lot of time. So when I go for a walk or they pop up here or there, I'm not on social media, I don't see them. But I still have love for them all, and I still want to talk to them if I see them. And the other day, one of my really close friends when I was younger literally lived at the other end of the street, and we're walking, me and my dad went for a walk. And as we're walking down the street, I saw one of them with her partner, and I was like, oh my God, it's her. I have not seen her for ages. And as I was walking towards her, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. You know, I've not seen her for ages. I wonder how she is. I saw her partner look at me and be like, whisper something to her. Then I saw her put her head down and like stroke this dog and completely stay stroking the dog in a really awkward position until I'd walked past. And there was nothing. There was no hi. There was no how are you? I haven't seen her for probably 2 or 3 years. And the last time I did, there were, you know, I think she did my waxing or something. There was nothing out of the ordinary. You know, it was what it was. So for me, there's no recollection in my mind of why she wouldn't possibly be wanting to talk to me. And it really hurt. And I'm walking down with my dad just being like, what did I do? And he's like, I don't know. And, you know, we didn't really know what to say. And he's like, you know, don't worry, you know, you've moved on, different things. And my dad's very positive, just likes to kind of make sure everything is positive, doesn't really like to dwell in anything. But I do, you know, it's not that I love to, but I like to think, and I'm thinking, did I do anything? What did I do? And then what I noticed was the following day when I went on the same route, when I got back to the same patch of where I got rejected the day before, I felt the rejection as I was walking up to that lamppost, and as I walked past it and carried on. The memory, the imprint of the event had happened, and it was just a lamppost that I was walking past, but my body was triggered as I'm walking up to the lamppost, and I'm like, oh, this feels crap. And I was on my own the second time, and I was just like, oh shit. And it felt awful because I've got no way of knowing. And there's a part of me as well that in the past, if anything's happened like that, I've actually walked up to people and gone, is everything all right? Like, you know, what's the situation? Which makes people feel quite awkward. But this just wasn't the moment. I was with my dad, they were stroking the dog of someone else, and I just thought, there's nothing I can do about it. So that was quite an unknown why, which I think is part of the rejection. When we don't know why, we also go into a different space, which we're going to work on in a minute. But another time I got rejected was actually in a relationship scenario. I mean, that's happened quite a few times. Even if you don't believe it, it's happened to me many a time. And I was told that, you know, this guy loved me, thought I was amazing, wasn't ready for a relationship. So I'm like, okay, no worries. It might just not be the right time. Off I go, do my thing. So I go to Ibiza, and he goes off to do his thing. And then all of a sudden I hear that he's going out with this girl, and he lets me know that he's going out with a girl, and he hopes that I'm happy for him. But I'm like, oh, you know, I was heartbroken. But the thing is, I think I was more heartbroken is because she was, and I think I said this on a show the other day, she was the exact opposite of me. And what I mean by that is every time I date a guy, after I date them, they go out with a shorter girl who's got brown hair, which I am never going to be shorter. I'm never going to have brown hair. My comparison thing comes up where I'm like, what's wrong with me? But it's something I can't even achieve to be. I can't even remotely become a short person with brown hair. And there's a part of me in myself that's like, oh, what do they have that I don't? And it's that rejection that, you know, was a big thing for me at the time because there was nothing I could do about it. And, you know, I couldn't compare myself because there's nothing to compare with. So I was left in that zone. So, Angie, you'll be a really good one to ask about this, actually. So the reason I love what you do on LinkedIn is because you do a very simple, although it probably takes quite a large amount of planning, but you do a really brilliant breakdown of scenarios and emotions that we might get to, or scenarios that could, you know, that could cause us to feel those feelings. But for someone like me and for the people that we're watching, that when they can't quite ask someone, why did you reject me? Or, you know, that feeling of unknowingness, what would you say to someone in that period that they're going through? What kind of advice and what would you go over with that?
Yeah. So I think that there's a number of angles you can take it from. I think one of the key things is, like, the way that I coach is a very stoic approach. So whenever you're in, take the situation that you're in, or you just mentioned that you got dropped by a guy and then he started seeing somebody who probably sounds just like me, short and brown hair. That's exactly who I am.
Yes.
So the point is that what he is basically demonstrating to you, and this is something that I'm plagiarizing from my coach, because we went over this when I was in deep coaching years ago, but he is basically demonstrating to you his preferences. And his preferences were in his head before you ever met him. So technically, none of us can ever really be rejected by anything. I mean, I know it hurts, and I'm not saying like we can just brush it off like emotion-free. But at the same time, if, for example, if I typically have a type of guy that I'm attracted to, it might be a particular frame, dark hair, dark beard, or something like that. But if I'm in a bar and a guy 6'7", very, very skinny, with bright blonde hair approaches me, even without knowing him, the chances are I'm not going to be likely to be attracted back to him. So he might ask me for a drink, and I'm unlikely to say yes. But he might be somebody else's massive fetish. But at the same time, it's not going to be mine. But those preferences in my head existed before he even walked into that bar. So how on earth can I be rejecting him? All I'm doing is expressing what was already inside me before he walked in. It's when he attaches that me expressing what I feel and what I want has anything to do with him, and he's taking that personally on him, and then he's internalizing it as that me expressing my preferences or anything to do with him personally. Yeah. And if we are interpreting it in this way that, okay, this person has said this thing, therefore what's wrong with me? What we're really doing is casting an expectation on the other person, or like a desire onto them. It's like we disempower ourselves by saying, I need you to, I'm basically giving you my power. So I'm putting something that I want to get from you, and I want to get back from you in order for me to feel good about myself. So that's why people don't go and ask people out easily, because they might get rejected, but they're going up to that person with the expectation and a projected desire that if I ask you out, I need you to say yes. And I'm attached to that yes in order for me to feel good about myself. So we completely disempower ourselves in that moment. So it's like, I need you to respond in a particular way for me to feel good about myself. So we hand over that power. So when we actually flip it in this particular way, we actually have a lot more strength than we realize when we stop disempowering ourselves, stop projecting a desire that we need to take something from them for us to feel good about ourselves, and also accept that that other person is simply expressing their preferences. So
do you know what? I knew there was a reason that I was stalking you on LinkedIn, and you just nailed it. Like, I honestly, I'm so happy because you're going to be on way more shows. You've just like lined yourself up there. But you very you very clearly expressed the point of it. You know, when I've read books and I've gone into that, that's exactly what I've read and exactly what I got myself out of by reading things like that. And you just nailed it. So thank you very much, because that obviously going to help a lot of people. It isn't, you know, something that we need to take on. It's something we just need to be aware of, that not everyone is going to fancy us in that day. And like, we don't fancy everyone else. And Adam, you wanted to say something, so go for it.
Yeah, it's like the lesson, or how I learned that lesson, in my early 20s when I came out of uni, I was like, I don't really want to do that, the thing I did at uni. And so I started doing bar work and TV work and various different things. But through doing TV extra work, you have to go to auditions. And so by the nature of going to an audition, like, you get turned away loads of times. And someone just said to me, well, you just haven't got what they want. And I was like, they were looking for something and you're not it. And so, and there'll be a time when you are it, and don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, yeah. And that's a really valuable lesson that I learned at that age. And it's exactly the same as Angie said, in a bar, it's an audition, isn't it? And, you know, and you've got what they want or you haven't, but it's learning to deal with that kind of, or accepting that. And that acceptance is actually quite, it's a difficult thing to achieve, of course. It's not easy, but
it's enlightening though. Very enlightening. It's a quicker way of going into it rather than resisting what actually is, because when we resist what is, you know, that's when the biggest pain comes. But you've just, like, both of you explaining very simply there, it's to adopt the reality of the situation and not to jump into the imagination of what we want it to be and what we hoped it was going to be and what we desire it to be and what we need it to be for the validation. And I sat in that rejection for so long. And it was just so hard, but it wasn't actually a rejection. And I was just like, oh, this is just an opportunity for me to learn to love myself. Okay, new challenge. But it took a long time to come into that. But so, Bill, you are on mute, but if you want to bring yourself off mute, you deal quite a lot with men, especially in a kind of a porn-related area. And I wanted to kind of connect the two, because and I think we mentioned this the other day on the porn, I would say on the porn show. And when I say that, it's just on the porn conversation we're having. Yeah. I said the other day, I got porn with Bill. And Dad's like, no, Dad, I don't have porn with Bill. So basically, a lot of guys, this is a preference thing. So I'm loving that you brought this up, Angie. So this is a preference thing, that when you're watching a porno, I don't like calling it porno because I feel like I'm really old when I say that. When you're watching porn, I don't know why I said porno. It makes me feel weird.
That's a magazine in a bush.
Right, yeah, it's a porno. Completely different. So when you're watching porn, there's, you choose what you want, right? You're like, oh, that one looks good, or that one looks good, or whatever. So in real life, we can't just click on something. I mean, we can go onto Tinder, but it's not going to be that healthy. But in real life, when you meet someone in a bar, pretended that there was no lockdown, when you meet someone and you're like, oh my God, I really like that person, you, as a man, you've got to pluck up a bit of that courage. You've got to either have a drink, and most guys do have a drink, they go over and they make the move. But lately, what's happening is there's a false kind of attraction for women based on what people have been watching on porn. And there's like this fantasy woman that they've got in their heads that they would like to approach. And, you know, if they see this person and they've had, you know, ultimate amount of wanks up until that time, where they've got all this energy and this power, and then they've seen a real life version of what they've been seeing online, and then they're like, oh, this is my one. There's even more expectation of wanting to go over and get this woman in this way. And this is where it comes like in the other way. Like, women have got to say yes. You know, they've got to go, oh yeah, I like you too. And that might not happen. But for a guy, from a guy's perspective, from that kind of porn perspective as well, I'd like you to kind of go into what a guy has to go through in order to get there, because some aren't very confident, and the ones that are really confident, that think they're going to get the women, they don't seem to mind when a woman says no. They kind of just try harder. So they're like, oh, I'll have another drink and I'll try again in 5 minutes, or maybe she'll say yes, and maybe if I just play it a little bit more, and maybe I'll get a number. And they kind of like, women aren't like that, or I'm certainly not. I don't know if you are, Angie. We're not. But men seem to have this thing where they don't really care about the rejection. They just carry on.
I mean, that's a great point. There's a lot of things that go into that, and it does come back to, you know, self-esteem and self-empowerment and those type of things. Where if you are a man who is confident, have, you know, high self-esteem, you can ask multiple times, because now you're just kind of becoming a scientist in the situation. You're just trying to figure out. You're not taking anything personally, but as Angie said, you know, you're just not the right person, or Adam said, you know, I'm just not the right, you know, person for this character. So you're wanting to figure out what is the right person, so maybe you can become that, where there might be a little bit of inauthenticity to that. But I can back up to where, you know, rejection, how it played in my life, and what so many people do to kind of mask or overcome that. When I was young, I was fearful of rejection. I was a skinny, shy, you know, introverted kid. And as I grew older, you know, every time I would approach a woman that I would maybe want to date, it was just immediate rejection. And so in order to mask that, I turned it into a life of maybe just indifference towards women. And again, I would set up a scenario to where if I approached them, and this is when online came out, online dating, online sites. And so I attempted multiple different ways of finding, you know, whether through websites or you know, AOL chat rooms or whatever it was, approaching women, you know, in a way that you might be able to hook up with them. So I turned it into a life of sex addiction, of hookups. And I would approach women in a very non-threatening way, but trying to go down the path of doing a hookup. And it was a way of masking rejection, to the point where if they turned me down, it's because they were turning down my advancement towards some sort of a hookup. I wasn't opening myself up to the vulnerability of truly being rejected for me and who I am.
Oh, interesting.
And that happens a lot and it comes back to Adam's t-shirt, as vulnerability, is we mask and we hide those areas in order to, you know, hide that fear of being rejection. One thing that shows up in, you know, working with men with sex addictions or porn addictions, and women, I don't want to, you know, specifically just say men, but a lot of men have difficulties orgasming with women. And a lot of that has to do with the porn. But when you strip all of that away, the one thing that I found is you can get right up to that moment of wanting to orgasm, but you don't. And men are like, I don't know why this is, and I'm frustrated. But when you dive a little bit deeper into the psyche, is that orgasm or ejaculation it's almost like the very last bit of vulnerability. If you've been vulnerable in every aspect, you can still hide behind that piece of, you know, if I don't ejaculate or orgasm, she might reject me later because of that. But if you do orgasm, now you've completely, you know, pun intended, been exposed. And if they still don't like you, now you have no basis for them to do that. So you open yourself up to that rejection. So there's many ways in which we mask. I don't know if that answered your question directly, but I see that that's how it manifests itself.
Yeah, it does. Because there was a guy that I was dating, and it was a thing where, you know, and he'd explained to me very clearly, and he said, I don't care who knows, it's a thing that I've got. Like, I find it really difficult to come with women. And he was just like, I don't know why. I'm just not really that interested. And I'm just like, I found it fascinating. And then we kind of got into the bedroom and he had no problems at all. And he was just like really freaked out and pulled away from me. And it was because there was the vulnerability and I was like talking to us. It was more intimate than it was, you know, like rampant. And he'd not been into that space before with the intimacy first. And he was like finding himself coming too soon. And you know, and it was just like a complete switch for him and he shut down. And I was just like, oh, you know, like, and I wanted to connect, but it was really difficult because I'd never experienced that before in a guy that was so verbally honest about his situation as well, which I find really refreshing. I think for a lot of guys, they wouldn't dare go into those vulnerable conversations, and they would help. You know, a lot of guys don't really know how to communicate their feelings, and us girls are there going, oh, why doesn't he just talk to me about his emotions? And it's like, if girls didn't go crazy when they do share their emotions, but if they did, you know, there would be like a kind of attraction there where a lot more could get done. But so I'm going to jump to Adam. Adam, we've had conversations about, you know, you writing articles before, and you've written articles about your feelings and you've expressed them very clearly, and you write in an amazing way. And I love what you write, and you're very honest and understanding about your feelings. And there's a part of your vulnerability that you share so easily. I mean, when you talk with me, it's fine. Do you share your vulnerability like me and you chat, and like what you write with when you meet a girl? So when you meet a new girl, are you as vulnerable as you are when we talk, or is that something because there's a date or because there's a connection that you're like, you hold it back a little bit?
Now I do. Like, I don't think I did. I think I've learned, the last 2-3 years for me have been an incredible journey, and I've learned a lot about myself in that way. But I think that what I realized, like, I'm very good at adapting to the scenario that I'm in, and I can say the right word. Like, this sounds egotistical, but it's not meant in this way. But I can say the right words in order to what a person wants to hear, to an extent. And I think a lot of people can do that. And I realized that that's actually a pattern of was a pattern of behavior, perhaps, that I was kind of shape shifting into what a person wanted me to be. And it's like, great, okay, you might end up having a nice time for a period, but it's like, well, that might not be exactly who I am. So it's actually kind of self-defeating. It's like, it's far better just to be upfront and not, you know, obviously people fall in love at different rates, like going all guns blazing, like first date, let's get married kind of thing is a bit extreme, but like, you know, but it's like, you need to kind of, you know, be you, and the quicker you can be you, the better, arguably. So someone said to me about their dating profile, as example, they were saying that, and I'm not on dating apps for a reason which I can explain and stuff, but the point they were making was, make your dating profile as specific as possible and as honest as possible about you. You might not get as many dates, but the ones you're going to get are probably they'd be more impactful. Like, and most people go on there's an ego trip going on the dating things. It's like match. It's like dopamine. It's like, great. But if you're actually there to look for someone and realistically and to find someone, it's about the quality, not quantity, isn't it? Of course.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Yeah, if that answers your question. It's like, I am open and honest now, but I also know that it's important to kind of temper things and engage the situation, because you have to be open at some point, and when it's the right opportunity to do it. Yeah.
Angie, can you take yourself off mute, please? Hello, welcome back to the conversation. So from a lady's perspective,
yes,
and from your previous experience of dating, I don't know if you've got a partner right now. I haven't asked that question before, but no. So when you have in your past, how have you rejected someone? Like, you know, let's say if somebody's trying it on with you, how do you feel when you have to say no thanks, you know, like moving on? Obviously you're very well trained in what you do, and obviously for work you're very meticulous about this, but on a personal level, how do you deliver your rejections, and how does that really make you feel?
It's just transparent honesty. Like, if there's something about the person that is the opposite to me, generally what I find breaks people up as values. So it can, I mean, there are some people out there that are quite fickle. But I generally aren't attracted to those people in the first instance enough to even go as far as getting on a date with them. But if I'm ever in a situation where I think we've got completely clashing values, I know it's not going to work. And so I don't measure people by things like what they wear, or, I mean, obviously it's nice to be attracted to somebody, but even then you can meet somebody initially that you're not attracted to that become attractive because you've got to know them or whatever. But it's when you see a completely different balance on the values. So I find, for me, like, I don't think conflict is ever enjoyable for anybody. And I actually conflict very, very rarely, but it's also to have the ability to be able to talk rationally when conflict arises. And that just down to a deeper level of your values and your level of emotional intelligence. So how people respond to things, you start getting a good idea of how they're going to react in conflict. If they have an opinion and they're completely inflexible, if you see something completely differently, or you want to do something at a different time, or just a slight difference of opinion and how people respond to that, you start getting, well, if you can react like that about that, what are you going to do when, like, the shit really hits the fan? What then? You know, that's significant, because if we're talking about spending the rest of our lives together, person, then we need to be able to talk about stuff as and when it gets heavy. And it's not about wanting it to be heavy all the time. To have the capability to go there when you need to, for me, is an absolute deal breaker. So that's something that I find tends to come up quite a lot in terms of the data game. How do I let people down? Just by being completely honest, like, this is what I'm looking for. It doesn't mean that I'm telling the other person that they're wrong or they're bad, because probably I've got the upper hand advantage a little bit in how I deliver a message. But I make it very clear, these are my preferences, this is what I'm looking for, this is what is a deal breaker for me, and all these other things are great, but this is literally a deal breaker. So that's basically how I word it.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's effective, and it is all about honesty. It's about being as truthful as you can in the moment to yourself first, because that's the level where you really need to dip in to find out what it is you want. And we talk about this facade. We talk about this thing where you go on a date and you meet someone, and we've said it a few times on these shows, is where you meet the sales representative. You meet the best version of that person when you go on a date, and they've done all the extra stuff because they want to be loved, liked, and taken home. Not always like that, but they want to be, you know, oh my God, you're the one, and they want something good to come out of this date. We go on dates not just to get laid. We go on to, you know, make a life. Essentially, we're looking to create a different aspect of our life. And I did a show with Jamie Cato from Faithless the other week. I don't know if any of you saw that. And I ended up crying on the show, which is obviously, now I know it's going to be a regular thing. It happens all the time. But he put me into a position with another guy who will probably also be watching now, by the way. Hi, Carl. He made us pretend that we were dating, and that the job was that when you meet someone, you say, hi, I find you very attractive. I really think this could go somewhere, but this is what you need to know about me. And what you tell them is the worst thing about you in that moment. And you literally open that up, the opportunity for them to see who you really are on the first date, which I found fascinating. And I had heard of before, but I'd never played the game as such. I'd heard of it, but I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Playing it, I was just like, oh my God, this is about me. And I start sharing because I was like, oh my God, this is straight away vulnerable. But what it allowed me to do was say something that I hadn't aired before in that way, and what I really need a guy to do, and that's show up. And I'm a communicator and I'm a talker, and I want to be able to have these conversations and to go deeper. But if I date someone that can't show up, that can't go there, they are incompatible with me at that time. And then we're only going to have a difficult conflict. No matter how much you want to be there, you're only going to have that difficult conflict moving forward, because one of you is willing to do one thing and the other one's not. So you're actually going in different directions. And, you know, you can blame the other person for ages. So like that can happen for 6 months. Like, he never shows up. But you yourself need to choose, is that person the right person for me? Because although I like him, if he's not going to show up for me, I'm going to be hurting myself it's like you're booking pain in for the future every time you have a confrontation.
Yeah, and the reason why people don't do that is a fear of rejection. Like, if they just show them who they are, is that if I show them who I really am, they might not want me. So I've done exactly that thing that I've gone a while back now, but gone on a date and said, right, let's just get it all out on the table. What are your like skeletons in your closet? Tell me something that you think is going to scare me off, and I'll tell you some things that are going to scare you off. And if we can get past the worst bits on our date 1 and 2, it can only get better from here. So like,
friends or more.
You tell me the things that are going to put me off right now, that tell me things about you that you think I'm not going to like, and I'll share some things about me that I think have historically gone against me, or say gone against me, but have been less popular than popular. So
there's a really interesting exercise that you can do that I've done and you can do is you just go, what I want you to know about me is, what I don't want you to see about me is.
Yeah.
If you do 3 or 4 rounds of that, then you're into the deep stuff, and it's like, oh god, it's not an easy exercise, but if you like those that are listening, like I might try that with your partner and just see what happens, because the connection.
With your new partner.
Sorry.
With your new partner that isn't your partner yet. We should do that with friends as well, I think.
Do it with friends. You can do it with current partners.
But what's really beautiful about it, though, as much as it is kind of, obviously you open up and you run, but the connection, the authenticity that it brings up, the like, if you are in a relationship, guaranteed after that you'll have a very, very beautiful romantic situation, and it will be lovely. Obviously to a new partner, it's slightly different perhaps, but it is a really, really amazing exercise.
Yeah. I think that in my life I've had and I've never really understood, I don't think I've never had like parental abandonment, like no one really left us when I was younger, but my dad did work away a lot, and I think I associated that. I'm very good at kind of long distance things because my dad went away and he came back, and I knew that he still loved me, and I'm kind of better with long distance things than I am when they're really up close and personal, when they're here all the time. And I find I've been single for quite a long time now, and I've thought whenever I've gone with, met a guy and I thought, I like this, there's a part of me that's like, I don't need you around all the time though, like maybe I can see you once a week, or maybe at the weekends, and the rest of the time is mine. And I have this whole thing in my head where I like to keep distant, and I'm like, but I'm busy, and I thought, I'm doing nothing, by the way, but I just like to keep this barrier. And it's ridiculous. But I'm very aware of my own patterns where I feel like nailing a conversation, like you just said, Adam, or what Jamie Cato said, is like there's so much I'm going to call it refreshment, but there's something really refreshing about that. And when I've had those conversations, in a sexual scenario, because I've done them not for dating, but when I've been with guys and I'm like, this is just a thing, like a hookup, and I've been really honest and present and vulnerable and intimate in the moment. And then, but that's because I know that that's all I want. And then I leave, and then they're like, oh, but I really like you. And I'm like, oh, I'm not really down for that. So I think I've used that intimacy skill in the wrong place. I've used it in the sleeping arrangement as opposed to the actual relationship thing. And I guess that's because of my own vulnerabilities of not wanting to go deeper and being quite, awkward again, hosting the talkwards. And I'm going to wrap myself up in an awkward conversation with a guy in the future, and he's going to be like, don't you host the talkwards? And I'll be like,
that as well.
You what, sorry?
Let's add on to that just a little bit as well, because it's in terms of what you said there, and like the fear of going deep and getting vulnerable and everything else. Earlier, you also said something very similar to when we are rejected, it's easy to kind of think, well, what's wrong with me, or why didn't you want me, or whatever. I actually had a friend recently who had a few dates, and then this person didn't want to see them again. So my friend was like, well, do I go ask them? Like, do I say, like, why? Like, what's wrong with, like, what can we do different? I was like, look, let's put it into really basic terms here. If you went to that person now and they said, why do you not want to see me again? And they said, because you eat too many jelly beans. He said, okay, so now I know I've got to eat less jelly beans. So then the next person you go is just, you eat less jelly beans. They go, do you know what? I don't want to be with you because you don't eat enough jelly beans.
Yeah.
So I'm using this analogy with jelly beans. So
that is totally true.
You can't, this whole adaptation to be the person that everybody's so different. We don't meet everybody's criteria. Everybody has different preferences. And that leads to people pleasing. It leads to not being authentic. It leads to shutting down our own people because we're scared of rejection. So it's this goes straight back to what we said at the beginning again. It's like this adaptation is all coming from the fear of rejection, but actually it's never about what did I do wrong or why didn't you want me. So it's the same as when we're trying to avoid the intimacy because we're not actually being real. You're not being vulnerable. You can't be. So and then it just gets shown out in different areas as well. I mean, intimacy as well as just general connection with people.
Yeah, there's a thing that which I don't think is a bad thing, but I've come accustomed to it now. Over the last, let's say, 12 months of my, and this isn't a therapy session for my dating, it's just all relevant, I swear. Like for the let's not say for the last 12 months, because that would be a lie, because that would mean I've been on dates in lockdown and I haven't. But before that, when I'd met guys, I've had the comments of like, you really know what you want, don't you? Like, you're very truthful. And, I do talk about absolutely everything. And that can also scare guys because I'm willing to be there, present, correct. And, hey, what's your feelings today? That makes people run that aren't necessarily ready and available to share in that way as well. So even when they've said, no, this isn't the right thing for me now, I've had to learn that it's not necessarily because there's anything wrong with me as such. It's because I'm ready to go a little bit deeper than what they might be ready for. But it doesn't mean I'm ultimately broken and, you know, no one's going to want me. It means I want to go on a different level of a journey. And that also, it can feel like rejection because you want to go on that journey and the other person's like, yeah, not for me. So there's that kind of deflatedness that I think there's a lot of people, I guess, in this, I'm going to say in the spiritual world, in the sense of a conscious relationship perspective. There's a lot of people out there that are now not wanting just to hook up or just a normal relationship, like a Netflix and chill kind of relationship, which just everyone's in now anyway for lockdown. But if you want like a conscious relationship, actually that's, you're saying to someone, hi, I want you to own all of your shit and be truthful and show up and never really leave me. Can you do that for me? Before you've even dated them, really, what you're asking. So when you say conscious relationship, that's quite an intimidating thing for people.
Yeah,
and you want to put your hand up, go for it.
So on that point, like I think it's to quote Chris Payne, like conscious relationships are muddy as fuck. Like that's like, and it's, but if you're going into that scenario, it's like, if you are conscious enough, you'll know that it's going to be that. Like if you're a person going, I want all of this from you, then that's not conscious, is it? Like it's kind of, you know that you're going to have to, like, I want a relationship and where you've got the connection where I want to know everything about the person and all the vulnerabilities to it in time, of course. But it's a difficult journey. It's a muddy journey. Even if you think you are or you are conscious and doing that, when you're revealing yourself in that way, it's still the mechanism within our bodies that happens, the vulnerability and trusting our body to catch it and doing all those things. There's a rejection point there where we need to learn to get over, and that's what I wrote this circle down, which is the vulnerability catch circle. Okay. So it's just a V and a C. It's like, it's an idea that I had for, this is what the clothing is based on, but I'm not trying to plug it, but it fits.
You can plug what you want, babe. Go for it.
But the vulnerability catch thing is like, my body has an emotional reaction, right? And there's an emotion behind, like an energy in motion. There's something underneath that generally that is causing, whether it's fear, shame, guilt, whatever. But then that happens and it feels weird, like it's an uncomfortable feeling. And then my brain's off to the races. And it's like, what we as humans need to learn to do is trust that it'll be okay and sit in that, whatever it is, and it will pass in time. And once we can get comfortable doing that with our partners, with our friends, with whatever it might be, and most importantly with ourselves, we gain a confidence that enables us to be more of ourselves and be more authentic. And so once you've learned that technique and recognize the mechanism, as I said, you gain the confidence, but that enables you to do it more with somebody else. So I can be vulnerable and trust them more to catch me. And then you're off to, like, it's a lovely scenario where the whole world is all lovely.
Catching everyone else.
I think there's a few steps to go before we get there, of course. But like, this whole show is about rejection. But I know that when I used to go into an anxiety spiral, that was my body and my mind. They're fighting against each other. There's rejection between the two things. And it's like, as soon as there's no acceptance that this feeling is uncomfortable, but it will pass, then that's where the conflict for me was. And then rather than just meditating through it or sitting with it and letting the clouds pass, I would resist it. And it's that resistance and attaching that I should be happy now, I should be doing this, and I should be, which is all bullshit. Like, I should be something else. Whereas, like, and that's just something, and going back to that 5-year thing, as in when I got my heart broken, society at this point in time is like, well, you should be happy all the time. And it's like, no, I was really fucking sad then. But what I was trying to do, I got back on the dating apps, got back out there, did all those things, and like tried to completely resist being sad. And it was like, no, that's not doing, and that's not accepting that vulnerability catch cycle. So.
Bill, you are recently, and there's a couple of comments I will mention. So the people who just made comments, I'm going to come back to. Actually, I'll do the comments first, and then I'm going to come back to you, Bill, if you can. You actually can answer this question. So 2 in 1. All right. John's put that it does not have to be muddy at all in terms of a relationship. As opposed, it doesn't, if you say you want a conscious relationship, it doesn't have to be muddy. Have you got any comments around that? Because you are in a fabulous relationship that's very recently new to you, and you're now growing and blossoming. And we're all sat here single. I think the rest of us are all single. We're all in the single corner. We might learn something from this comment and this guy. So Bill, educate us, please.
Absolutely. I mean, we need to turn the show in another 2 hours. But
by the way, I can go as long as you want on the show. I'm
so
no time.
I am in a new relationship. I was engaged last March. I'm 49 years old, the first time in my life I've ever been engaged. And she's a beautiful, young ex-model, yet entrepreneur, intelligent, just beautiful, gorgeous, everything. And she's also 18 years younger than I am. And so, when you talk about rejection, there's a lot of things. A lot of people come in thinking either, she's just looking for a sugar daddy or something like that. The joke's on them. She makes more money than I do, believe it or not. But it really comes down, which everybody's touched upon, is the vulnerability. And where Adam just talked about that is working towards seeing vulnerability really is a true strength and not a victimhood. And when you can stand in vulnerability as strength, then you can start to empower yourself, which Angie alluded to earlier, where it's really all about empowerment. As us as coaches, our goal is to hopefully empower our clients and empower the people around us. And how do you do that? You look at a scenario. There's things in life that just happen to us. That's the thing that's real. Something happens. Somebody rejects you. From that nanosecond after that, everything is made up in our brain, and it's all based around the ego. And unfortunately, as Angie said earlier, a default is what's wrong with me? I did this. I did. I'm a screw up. Everything in the world. And I coach my guys to take each scenario of what happened to you and how can you retrain those triggers that immediately go down the negative road into an empowering trigger. So step away from the I and the ego aspect of it and say, okay, what happened? How can I turn this into a moment where I can be completely empowered in the situation? What can I learn from it? What can I grow from it? How can I respond? How can I see the other side of the person? Because 9 times out of 10, the rejection might not have anything to do with you. It could be so much around the other person and what's going on in their life. Maybe they don't feel worthy of you. There's so many aspects of it that you can make things mean. But the real beauty is once you're conscious about intentions and meaning, we now, instead of inherently reactively making negative meanings out of anything that happens, we can consciously be deliberate and put empowering meanings to those things that happen to us in life. And training your brain, it's like golf. It sounds really easy, but you have to go and train and find those scenarios. And in those moments of strength and vulnerability is find people in your life that you can trust and start opening yourself up in that space of vulnerability in an area that you feel safe, that you can be rewarded. That's how my life changed, is I was rewarded by my deep vulnerability with a group of 30 friends. It could have gone down a bad road if I wasn't prepared and completely locked up, but I was rewarded by it, of my connection with them, the way they saw me. They came to me advice. They felt like they knew me more. And so I was rewarded by vulnerability. And start building your core outward of strength and vulnerability.
Okay. Can I just add about my point about the muddy bit? Because there's an attachment to muddy and negative. I wasn't referring to negative. I just meant it's an adventure. It's like going across a muddy patch where it's like there'll be ups, there'll be downs, and you will be pushed, you will be pushed to your limits because being vulnerable isn't an easy thing to do. And you get to the edge of your comfort zone, and at the edge of your comfort zone, it's like you're vibrating really quickly and it's an uncomfortable feeling. That's what I meant by muddy. And all of those, muddy to me that's a brilliant, that's the type of restaurant relationship that I want.
You wish it was strong.
I don't know, but I do love going to
Someone's got a lockdown thing going on in the restaurants right now.
Have you not been to muddy restaurants? There's such a fashion right now. But
We have.
But exactly that. So it's just the muddy. I meant muddy in that I want a relationship which has got a bit of grip, which has got a bit of someone pushing me pushing them, and that's a positive thing I was referring to. I didn't think that's a negative.
Yeah. Until then, we can do that. We can have a muddy friendship, Adam. We'll keep pushing each other, which we do. We always challenge and grow, which I love. And it's, this is the thing that I really value is when you've got a really good friend that you can play that role with and have that game with, because you can teach each other to communicate in a healthy way that helps you when you get into a relationship as well, which is really ideal. So, Angie, I'm going to chuck a question. I had something written here that I wanted, that something came up. Jamie's game covered that. Difference of opinion you mentioned at the beginning, because I'm going to name you as an expert in communication because I've seen your whiteboards on LinkedIn, and you very easily break down these conversations of what people could be having and what I'm not going to say, what they are having, and then what they could be having, and it's a very it's sometimes the things that you write on the board are slight differences in this tiny little difference in the language as the approach, which is sometimes all it takes. You don't have to become a linguist and learn etymology of all the words and just to be able to come better at language. It's just sometimes a slightly different perspective, and it's less assumptive and more co-creative, shall we say. If someone was coming to kind of discuss a rejection, and they were having to deliver why they were rejecting someone, why they were saying no to someone, could you give us a kind of a little example of maybe, you can make it up in your head because you're really good at this, but like an example of how someone could let someone else down effectively in a little communication way, that helps them rather than hinders them? If I put you on the spot, just tell me to say no.
You can put me on the spot, because it really would depend on what it is, but as long as they're being honest in an authentic way. So the way that I coach honesty, excuse me, the way that I coach honesty is different from what the society tends to assume honesty is. So a lot of people would say, I'm being honest because I will tell them that they are being an idiot, or I'll tell them that they are rude, or I'll tell them that they shouldn't have done that, or whatever, and they think that's honest. Whereas I would consider that judgmental. There's different, I have like a spectrum of honesty that I share, but it goes from, right from the extreme dishonesty, which is lying, and then up to different levels of honesty, whatever. I'm not going to break it all down now, so it's too big. But if you're going to say to somebody, you are this, then what you're really saying is, I interpret that behavior as this. That's your interpretation. That's the honest thing. That's the only thing you can ever be rawly honest about, is how you interpret it, how you feel about it. So when people say, you made me angry, that's not actually honest. But the honest thing is that behavior I interpret as upsetting or rude, and now I feel upset. So that's the truth. So when somebody delivers like a letdown to somebody, if you just want to not go into any detail, you can say something as simple as, this isn't the chemistry that I'm looking for. So that doesn't say you're a bad person. It doesn't say you're this or you're that. It's not offensive. It really is about, I'm looking for something different, and this isn't what I'm looking for, but I've had a lovely time, but this isn't the chemistry that I'm looking for. Or if it was something great and you wanted to be specific, you can be specific and say, it's important to me that I'm with somebody that, if, for example, a lady or man, whatever, has 3 children, and the person that they're dating doesn't care for children. Like, I'll put it my one, like, I've got a dog, and if I'm going to date with somebody, they're going to have to like dogs, because we come for a 2 for the price of 1.
I'll date you. What dog you got?
Rottweiler. He's amazing. But obviously, some people I don't like dogs. I'm like, well, I'm not ever going to get rid of my dog. So I wouldn't say you're an asshole because you don't like dogs. I would simply say, for me, it's a deal breaker, because we come as a 2, and if he isn't going to be welcomed into our life, then then I have to move on that way. So you can only ever communicate it from how you interpret it, what it is that you want, and what it is that you decide from there onwards, as opposed to being a point of blame about the other person, because that's where conflict is most likely to be triggered. So it's unfair to blame the other person, that they came in with their preferences as well, in the same way you did. So all you do is express your own.
Now, this is a really important point, because as an example, my dad said to me once, he's like, I've got all these feelings, I just don't know how, I don't have the language to talk about them. And so partly the thing about enabling people to talk. So one way that I learn myself is through, obviously it's non-violent communication, things like that, is if you're talking about how you feel or having a discussion around that, talk about with I feel this. Don't say you are a dick. So I mean, if you say that, then that's immediately confrontation.
That's my favorite sentence.
But if you say you are something, whatever it is, you're as Angie said, it's like that. There's an element of judgment with that. But if you say I feel this, then it's all about yourself. However, that's a double-edged sword as well, because anything beginning with any sentence beginning with I is a definition, and definitions by their very nature are limiting. So be careful with definitions in that way, but that is the way to express yourself, is to say, because you're expressing from your point of view, who I am.
Yeah. There's a real kind of interest around communication and effective communication. There's actually a book, and I've forgotten what it's called, and it's on my shelf. And I actually went on 2 of their courses, and it's called Arts. This is not the book, but this is called I'm trying to remember what it's called now. Anyway, art is authentic relationship training. And I was profound. I was amazed. It was profound what I learned on that weekend. So I went on to a second weekend as well. And it's just the approach on the communication. And it really did help me and understand my role, because I have been really direct in my life. And I do deliver information with a sledgehammer sometimes, because it's just what I've always done. And I have to tame that and grow and change and and evolve, and I can't be blamed for everything, but I do need to take ownership for everything as well at the same time. And there's a real like, oh God, I've been doing everything wrong. So even though I felt refreshed from learning that information and was like, wow, there's so much I could learn from this, I did also feel like, oh my God, there's loads of people I need to apologize to, because I realized my own lack of communication skills at the time. And although I can articulate a lot of things, and I'm really good at articulating, and I pull out words from different places, and people think, God, how did you get there? I'm so much sometimes in my head from communicating, and sometimes I forget to bring it back into the body. And when I deliver it to people, it can sound quite blunt. And there's also this like constant practice that we need to kind of deliver. But at the same time, there's an essence, there's almost too far, so being too conscious, so constant correctors, I call them CCs. So there's a lot of CCs out there where they're constantly correcting their every action and every move and every action you do, and they're trying to control and manipulate their reality to become perfect. And I've met quite a few of those people who are constantly trying to become perfect. And I was guilty of that myself until about 3 or 4 years ago, where I was just like, oh God, I just got to let this go, because I'm going to flop and make loads of mistakes, and that's going to be okay. But it's the constantly, and it's good to want to improve your communication, and it's good to want to improve your life and not to be a dick and to be as nice as you can. But there's this extreme place of perfectionism, which is getting in the way of a lot of real, genuine conversations. Adam, you look like you want to say something. That's so well. Go for it.
You've touched on something that's really important, because it links to like cancel culture and things like that. It's like, first and foremost, we are humans, like the top thing, and the nature of being human is imperfection. That's like, we all fuck up at times, we all make mistakes, and that by the nature of that, it's forgiveness as well. And that's really, really important, not only to forgive yourself, but obviously to forgive other people. And go back to Angie's point right at the beginning, where she talked about the politics and defining yourself in one way, and then it's like, the people that are achieving perfection or trying to achieve perfection, there's a lot of, I am this, I am not that. And it's like, it's a them and us. And as soon as you're in a them and us situation, that's not a good place for the humans to be. We don't want to be there. Like, and so trying to, and that's the thing of like, if going back to my point, I wasn't trying to be perfect when I was talking, if I was on a date and I was, saying the right thing at the right time or whatever, it might be like that, because I mess up all the time. But my day job is an innovation consultant, and I train people in that and how to gain confidence to change direction and do various different things. And the very nature of doing that, of trying new things, you're going to fail. You're going to fall over, and it's important that you do. And most importantly, on the other side, it's important that people that people will forgive you and forgive that scenario. Because if you don't, otherwise you don't have the confidence to do it yourself, and then you don't know who you are or where you are, and you're all over the place. And this perfection that you're trying to achieve is never going to be, you're never going to achieve it. And so then that opens up a whole bag of worms of other mental health issues. So it's like, so it's all about learning to a sense of who you are and how you are, but also accepting that you have got no fucking idea what you're doing, really, because we're going through life. The future is completely unset, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Very true. So there's one thing I wanted to mention about which I think is really good, because there's all 4 of us in this kind of position as well, is that I had a conversation a while ago with someone around when the coach dates the coach, or when the mentor dates the mentor. And it was such a fascinating conversation, because there's this level of confidence that you get when you coach, or when you're a mentor, or when you have your practice, as it were. and you become confident. And for a good 8 hours of your day, you are seen as the expert or the person that is, you know, the go-to. And somebody pays you to be in that role, in that position. And that affirms that you know what you know, and you're quite often right. And they're listening for tidbits of wisdom that you're chucking out. So when you have this constantly elevated space of being a really good version of yourself, when you go back into an environment when you are extremely vulnerable, getting it wrong, dropping the ball, and, you know, making the biggest fuck ups, then you think, how did I do that? I know that I shouldn't have done that, but you do it anyway. And you're like, oh God, it's that vulnerability that you have to go to when you're coaching or mentoring, that you have to revisit all the time within your own journey. It doesn't, because you coach doesn't mean that you're perfect. But there's this thing when you start dating someone else, if they're not a coach, you can go into this space where you end up, you know, being seen as their life coach, and they'll want to get all this information from you while you're dating them, and they'll end up becoming their kind of agony aunt, which is a really unhealthy relationship dynamic. But when you date another coach, there's this, I don't know my place, because this person's up here and I'm up here, but I know this, and who's dropping the ball first, and when you drop the ball, and then there's this embarrassment. And I had a very brief encounter with someone that was a therapist, and it didn't quite work. And it was a conversation that was very therapy-like, and I didn't feel any of I felt very holding space kind of energy. And I was like, oh, this feels really uncomfortable. It wasn't just flowing. And it was really unfortunate. He wasn't trying to do it at all. And he wasn't meaning to do that. And he was a lovely guy and he's an amazing therapist, but the energy just wasn't there between us. And I had this conversation with someone else that a lot of the times when and there's so many coaches out there now and experts, have you guys, any of you guys, had any difficulties or come across this in your own love lives when you meet this coach, mentor, therapist in your own lives when you've dated someone? You can all go in whatever turn you want. Angie, you're closest to the mic.
I've only ever had one date with a coach, so it was an experiment for me. And I say experiment, like I went in open-minded, but I was actually optimistic before we met because of his. I don't know if disclose who he is. Actually, I'm obviously not going to say his name, but the area that he coached in would suggest that he was going to be awesome on this date. Let's just say that. So I was like, cool, that gives me my expectations, because I don't actually go into any date. I don't go out dating. I'm not like serial dater or anything, but as and when I go to a date, I generally drop my coaching hat. It goes on the shelf and that's it. And I'm just going to turn up as Angie. And I don't go in with the view that I know more than you because I'm a coach, because there's loads of different coaches, there's loads of different people, and even people that don't have any background that I do, they'll teach me loads of stuff that they know about. So I don't go in with like I'm here, you're there. But I do believe that when you go in, you have to have the foundations of good values and good things, like good intentions of getting to know the other person. So I ask a lot of questions. I don't really say a lot about myself unless I'm asked. And I'm probably projecting here a little bit, but I'm hoping to see that from the other person, because they're the people that I'm genuinely warm to. That's somebody that is genuinely wanting to get to know me in the same way that I'm genuinely wanting to get to know them. And then if you're both singing off the hymn sheet, the conversation just flows, because you're asking questions, they're asking questions, you're having a nice little chat about stuff, you're going into vulnerable areas, whatever. But anyway, long story short, I sat this day and he probably spent 95% of the time just relentlessly talking about himself. And I was just, I can't believe it. Mm-hmm. Like, and it wasn't even that, so he'd say something and I'd say, so, you know, what happened then? Or like, I'd ask probing questions and I'd get these long answers. And then I think, right, I've asked about a million questions now, it's your turn. So I'd just sit there like that, waiting for eventually get a question. And I'd give him probably like a couple of minutes answer. Then he'd start with, you know what, I had that happen to me as well. And then it'd go back into him again. I was like, oh my God, like this is somebody that it was quite a bit scary, because this guy goes out and teaches people to coach other people to be authentic in these dating situations. So
yeah, it's when what is it when they say you come down off of your pedestal that you have them up on? And then, yeah, you have this idea of
yes. So I was partly responsible for that, because I went in with probably that
an expectation.
This is going to be like this. And that was my own fault for having, I should have gone in completely blank-minded. But then given the background and what they specialize in, which is slightly more than what I've just, they have a very specific niche. I was like, okay, this is going to be very cool. Like, this is somebody that really has their shit together. So we've got high emotional intelligence. And I'm not saying that they didn't. Maybe there's other reasons. Maybe they were just having a bad day. I can't judge that person on that 2 hours that I spent with them. But it was enough for me to think, I don't want to go there again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Sounds like,
Yeah. Bill, you go.
Yeah. I mean, a couple scenarios that I've learned through this process, because when I first started out coaching, I wanted to coach everybody, and everybody got pissed off. It's like, get out of my business. And really learning about myself, and also having that confidence that I'll say me, I am the very best in the world at being a porn addiction recovery coach. But the key is not to be comparative to anybody else, because somebody else is going to be very best in the world at it as well, for their own perspective and the people that are following them and the results that they're getting for other people. When I started this journey, there's probably 15 other porn recovery coaches out there. Like, I'll never be as good as them. They've been studying this longer than I have, but deep down, I know my story. I know what it took, and I know how to get other people through that resonate with my own personal story and how I did it. So I'm very best in the world at that. It doesn't mean that somebody else's story isn't going to be very best in the world for them. And so you can objectively look at that without thinking, are you better or worse than someone else? And so I go to other coaches. What can I learn in their journey that maybe I can apply to myself? A little bit different than what you asked, and it goes back to my original statement. In my relationship with my fiance, with her being younger and being an entrepreneur, when we first started out, there's tons of things that I wanted to coach on. And of course, the wrong thing I did was voluntarily start doing that. And realizing that is not the right thing to do. So what I had to go back and coach myself and not her, and realize everybody, when they're ready for coaching, they will come to you. They will seek it out. And in our relationship, I find so much comfort in the times. And I've asked her, I said, how can I support you in what you're doing? And she's given me specific ways. So I just do that. Now, are there things that I know she's doing that if I could implement, if she would listen to me or whatever it might alleviate or shorten that process or make it better or whatever it might be? But realizing that's part of the human experience and growing is letting her face that. And she knows that I'm there as a safety net. When it's absolutely necessary, she can come to me. So giving up that space of it, you don't have to force it upon anybody. You just do what you do. And I go to this fact that, early on, also, I found myself wanting to prove to people in the world why porn was bad. I stopped that real immediately. I don't have to prove it to anybody, because I get a lot of trolls on Facebook and Instagram that are saying, oh, porn is awesome. And, I do it with my relation. Great, go do it. If you're living your most empowered, loving, compassionate life, then do it. But I know how it was bad for me. And there's so many other people out in the world that know it's bad for them. I'm there for them. I'm not out to convince anybody else otherwise.
Yeah. I've got a really shit joke. I just wanted to say that they're all wankers and ignore them, but that was just
a
really shit joke.
I mean, it is. And, but the thing is compassionately talking to trolls. I have privately turned them into people that have talked and let off sob stories. They trolled hard, but again, it's a deflection. And you can tell me all you want. I mean, you're not going to shake my foundation, because I know what it did in my life. And if you're ready, I can provide my experiences through that and my techniques through that.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons for me, doing the coaching work that I do, it's not a lot of it, but the little bits that I do, it's more based on admin and personal responsibility and showing up to all the different things in life, which is a very unique, it's a personal responsibility coach. And people are like, what's that? And I'm like, let me show you. There's a whole area of your life that you're not doing. And I can fit right there. Yeah. And there isn't much competition, but I don't promote myself, and I won't promote myself in the sense of going out and getting clients. Because when people are ready, they'll find me. And I feel like I feel a lot more easier with that. And I feel more trusting for myself in that, and I naturally get what it is that fills that space. But I know you, Adam, as well. You're now going onto your coaching journey, and I think you've got a lot of personal wisdom and insight already before you may not even position yourself as a coach. You're doing it largely for self-reflection, but you are very kind of analytical mindset, reading a lot, and obviously we love deep conversations when we have these chats. And do you feel that level of personal development interest and now coaching perspective is something that helps or hinders your dating scenario?
Massively helps. Overall, knowing oneself better definitely has helped me in that way.
You said that very posh then, knowing oneself.
Didn't I say oneself? But you're when you were talking about coach to coach, in the context you gave it, and you gave head to head, cognitive to cognitive. And dating's mainly about somatic, isn't it? It's about your body. How do you feel next to them? It's almost regardless of what they're saying. Do they make you vibrate? Kind of thing. Do you resonate with them? That's really really important. And then the thing that one a saying that it's those who talk don't know, and those who know don't talk. Like in the scenario of giving advice, it's like I learned, you know, there is flipping into or being in coach mode and then seeing someone, you need to turn it off, like learn how to turn it off. And but also, if someone wants advice, let them ask for it. If you give it, a person, the reason that when a coaching session starts, you get embodied into it, there's room for it, the space is there, it's held really, and that's why they work as they are, because everybody's open and ready for growth or movement or however it is. But if you like someone walks in and you know you just literally bombard them with something, if they're not ready, it's just going to bounce off, like, and it's almost pointless saying it. So it's like, but to answer your question, it's like I'm currently recently started dating someone, and she's actually a coach. So it's like, but we've caught each other and like got a kind of a jokey thing. We just say, all right, coach, if we flip into coach mode in that way. But then there have been opportunities where, like you would in the coach, you ask, are you ready? You know, is it okay for us to talk about that from like on a coaching level kind of thing? And are you ready for that? Would you like to? And it's perfectly acceptable to say no. And like if the person says no, then it's a no, and you carry on and go, sure, when you're ready, we'll talk about it. Yeah. But in the sense of, in the short, to answer your question about whether it's useful in dating, to know what I want, and therefore the boundaries in a good, positive way that I put up, and I'm secure enough now to put those up. It helps my selection, I suppose, or it's narrowed it down to, as I said about the dating profile. It just enables you to be more selective about it, you know, and the people that you end up meeting are more suited to you because you know yourself better.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I didn't know about your new dating.
Yeah, we haven't caught up.
It's just a couple of weeks. No, I'm like, gossip. Yeah. I've already said I'm going to spend some time with Angie after the call today, so I'll have to call you tomorrow. But I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. And I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been very easy flow, and it's just been, there's good things that I think a lot of people will learn. And each one of you have got an amazing perspective coming from the lives that you do. So you're all welcome back, and I would love it. Angie, this is not your last show. I'm having you back. Perfect. So has anybody got anything they want to share or add or promote? Now is your time.
Something I want to add but not share, like not from a sense of like promote myself, just generally it actually adds on to the rejection thing, and I think it's quite significant actually, and I don't think we've specifically covered this, but just from the sense that often we choose not to do something because of the fear of rejection. So we might not apply for a job. We've spoken a lot today around dating and the relationship world, but this leads into like our careers, the friendships that we choose, staying in the wrong friendship groups for us, like staying in friendships where we feel obligated rather than people that we genuinely enjoy spending our time with. So we hang out with people that are, like lower our vibe or whatever. But if we choose not to do something at the fear of rejection, so let's just use a job and move it away from dating, then if you don't take the opportunity for that job or for that application or whatever, you're not going to get the job anyway. So by default, you've kind of, I don't want to say failed, I don't like that word, but by default, you've not got the thing that you're allegedly scared of. Because if you go for it and you get rejected, you're not going to get it. And that's allegedly what you're scared of. So by not applying for it, you're not going to get it anyway. So it's not actually really the thing about not having it that actually is the issue, because you're basically choosing to have a behavior that will guarantee the thing that you're saying you're scared of. So the significance is the association you have with the rejection of not doing it. That's different. So we're not actually being necessarily completely honest with ourselves when we say, well, I don't apply for that job in case I don't get it. You're not going to get it if you don't apply for it. So it's not really about not having the job. So that's not strictly honest with ourselves. So to reach a deeper level within ourselves, and a deeper level with honesty, and a deeper level with consciousness and being aware, we have to start being honest with the things that we say, because they're not actually strictly honest in that moment. The thing that we're really scared of, I'm scared of rejection. That's the truth. As opposed to I'm scared of not getting the job, because you're moving it, you're shifting your mind into something that's actually not accurate in that moment to what you're really scared of. And I just wanted to drop that in because we do it all the time. It's like I'm scared of not getting this, or I'm scared he might reject me, or she might reject me, or I'm scared of not getting the job, or I'm scared of how they'll react. It's nothing to do with that. Like, it's actually the fear of rejection. It's why we're not assertive when we could be. It's why we're not holding boundaries when we could be. Because in order to hold a boundary, you have to speak out about something that you want, that is obviously precious to you. Somebody's reached that boundary, It's the fear of being rejected by that person when you hold your own boundaries. So then we start lowering our own boundaries, basically. So as a result, the message that the brain gets is what they want and feel is more important than what I want and feel. And we position ourselves here, and then we wonder why we have lower confidence and find it harder to battle against things like rejection. So that's why it can work on a downward spiral.
Yeah.
So at least recognizing these patterns that we do enables us to start stepping out of them and catching ourselves when we're in them. It's not about being perfect, but just to be aware of these behaviors is a massive stepping stone to our own deeper self-development.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's amazing.
I want to piggyback on that. That's a fantastic point. That again, this phrase in the States is "you miss 100% of the shots you don't take," and but to that point, in reality, there are no real fear. The real fears that we have are things that are imminent in death. If we're put in a room with grizzly bears, there's a real fear that we're going to die because it's very possible. But everything else is all just made up in our head. The fears that we have. And if you can go back and look at your life of any of the emotional fears that you've had around rejection, you've gotten through all of them with flying colors, and most of them you've forgotten. You can go back and realize, oh God, it felt horrible in that moment, but it was just temporary and made up. And so if you can start changing your mindset around that, if I fear rejection, as Angie said, because of X, Y, Z, start changing these to, I welcome failure. I welcome rejection because here's how I've grown in the past from it, and start, opening yourself up to that again, that it's a stance of strength and vulnerability, and kind of changing your mindset around it.
It's powerful. It's like last night, yesterday's show was meant to be about gym addictions, and I'd recorded, and I knew I couldn't get the guests for it, unfortunately, and I'd recorded another one with Jonathan Goldman and his wife Andy. So I thought, right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to premiere that show that I've pre-recorded at 7:00, and YouTube wouldn't allow me to put it, and it wouldn't go at 7:00. So I was like, oh, it's really annoying. So I had this space where I was just like, what do I do? The nice things, because people are expecting me to be online because I promised I'd be there at 7. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to jump online and do something different in this space. Whereas usually I'd be like, shut the laptop down, avoid it, and just wait until that video processes. I had this space where I'm like, I've just got to show up because I promised everyone I'm going to show up at 7. So I'm a bit screwed here. So I just showed up and I did something different, which was a tiny little mini meditation. And I was just, but no one was watching me at the time until like halfway through. But while I'm sat here with a 0, with no one watching me, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm doing a meditation to no one. This is like, and it felt so, it felt so weird. And I'm like, oh, I fucking hate this. But then I thought, you know what? And then one person popped up, and then 2 people popped up, and then I think there was like 4 people in total. But it's when they say, if you can help one person, that's really important. So I kind of, when I came off, I went and got in the bath, and then Adam, you messaged me and you were like, Nat, I know I heard you say on there, like, you didn't dare do this because you weren't sure about it. And like, your voice was amazing. And I'm really glad that you did it because it was just exactly what I needed. And I helped that one person because I sat in, I would do. And I helped that one person sit in that space with me. And I didn't even know who it was until the time afterwards, but it was terrifying for 6 minutes. Like literally 6 minutes, awful, because I'm like, no one's here and I'm just doing this on my own. But I had to just take a risk and jump into that. So, even in that space where you feel like you're rejected, something good can come out of it if you apply yourself and you're willing to go there. And it was tricky. And today you're here. So it all worked out very well. But I wanted to say thank you so much for all of you for joining me. You're fabulous. Yeah, do you know what you keep doing? I'm going to get you a talking stick. I need to get you a talking stick that you can wave.
It's fine.
What were you going to say?
It was just about the point of the closing thing on rejection is that to add on to Angie's and Bill's point is that rejection is very closely linked to fear of abandonment, of course, and fear of abandonment goes back to primal times, and it's something that isn't going away. Like the fear isn't going anywhere. Like it will happen. Because we're like 97% ape or whatever it is, and it's a natural reaction to have, and you will have it. And the only way out is through it. Like you're never gonna be able to get rid of that reaction. It will be there, and it's something around that I had to learn with regards to anxiety. That vulnerability is an anxiety, and it's a direction. It's a signal for growth. It's a signal to go forward, not a signal to stop. I think that we have our reactions to fear and love are almost the wrong way around. Our reaction to fear is to run away from it, whereas we should move towards it. And our reaction to love is to hold on to it, whereas we should actually let it be free and be as much, which is very difficult to do. But the one of the practices that the t-shirts enable is micro anxieties. So the way to gain your confidence, and this is what I do in the day job, is that you do a little thing, do a small thing that tests your confidence and makes you feel vulnerable and do all those things. And then when you do that, you it's like rings of a tree. You move out slightly, and then you do another thing, move out slightly, and before you know it, and it's a bit cheesy, you've got a solid oak, and you're confident at these things. And you look back and go, God, I was nervous about that. I'm not nervous about that anymore at all. But the only thing I would like to say at the end is that there's a book by Sue Johnson, which I've recommended to you, Nat, which is Hold Me Tight, which is an absolutely beautiful book in regards to how to communicate, how to deal with these fears and the rejection and things like that, and then how to communicate effectively. If you're in a relationship or about to start a relationship or wherever it is, the book will help you, and it will help you communicate and connect with other humans. So I fully recommend reading that book.
Yeah, it was a great book. I loved the recommendation. Thank you very much. So tomorrow, we are back on tomorrow, and tomorrow is how to make a relationship work. It's conscious relationships. I am joined by Jules, who joins me from Sex Club. Jules is coming on, and then I have 3 of my favorite couples joining me, and basically one of which I actually have never met. Sorry, there's 2 couples that I admire and love, and one of the couples I've never met, but I've heard a lot about, and they're all willing to come on and talk about their awkwardness, which is great. So we're going to be discussing that and just going deep into that kind of vulnerable space in relationships. So that's going to be at 7:00 tomorrow night. And then on Friday, I have a really good one about brotherhood, the power of brotherhood, and what it means to have a solid group of men around you, consistently around you, helping you fly, helping you drop in, whatever it is you need. But these 2 guys are some 2 guys I really admire. I've known for some time. So we're going to be going into that brotherhood section there. So if anybody wants to know more about Adam's festival, it's down below. It's the Great Connection Festival. I am hosting the music channel on the 31st of January. Adam is doing a fabulous job, and I think it's amazing. If you want to reach out to Angie and talk about any of these whiteboards that she's been doing that I've been chatting about, and all of the wisdom that she's got there, reach out on LinkedIn. I think I also put your website under there, if I remember rightly. And if you want to talk about porn and anything else and the man stuff in the top corner there, you got Bill Ranshaw, who tried to make is it your bedroom that you're in, made it look more I am sound.
No, it's my living room.
Your living room. There you go. Living room.
Yeah, we got the chocolate colors in there.
Yeah, that you're making your lights in there. I really appreciate it, guys. I am doing whatever I can to be online at 7:00 every night. And if you guys, like I said, I'm going toe to toe with Boris. I'm not going to stop until lockdown ends, and I'm going to be here as often as I can. So if anybody's got any other subjects they want to discuss, please reach out and let me know. You can go to our website or you can make comments here. Happy to have conversations about anything, as you know, and I will find my very best guests to pull on and be in the awkwardness with me. But I think, and if you haven't already, subscribe, please, because I'm trying to grow my subscribers. So that will be very nice. And I don't think there's anything else to add apart from, chill out, have a good one, and I love you all, and we'll see you tomorrow. You 4, if you can just wait here for 1 second, but the rest of you, will see you tomorrow at 7. Bye for now.
I appreciate everybody here. Thank you.
Guys, thank you.